An aggressive bobcat kitten refused everyone, until a white Labrador did the unthinkable. In the wild backcountry, a tiny predator, scarred by pain and rage, would rather die than trust a human hand. Farmers warned it could never be tamed. Neighbors said it was doomed. But then a gentle old Labrador stepped forward, and what happened next shook everyone to their core. Because this bond wasn't just unusual, it was dangerous. Someone was watching, someone who wanted the kitten gone forever. And when hidden traps and ruthless threats began to close in, the question became chillingly clear: could loyalty between a wild heart and a loyal dog survive against a force determined to destroy them both? Before we dive in, drop a quick hello in the comments, maybe your name, maybe your city. Every reply reminds me this isn't just my voice, but our space. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Ruthie Wainwright's ranch as she walked the fence line, checking for needed repairs. Her boots crunched against the dry earth, the sound echoing in the quiet landscape. 20 years of marriage and 3 years of widowhood had taught her the importance of these daily inspections. It was the little things that kept a ranch running. A sharp, pained cry pierced the air, stopping her in her tracks. Following the sound, Ruthie discovered a young bobcat kitten caught in a rusty trap, its leg pinned between cruel metal teeth. The sight made her stomach turn. The trap wasn't hers, probably left by Clayton from the neighboring property, who was known for his ruthless predator control methods. The kitten's amber eyes blazed with fury and fear. Despite its small size, it spat and hissed, showing needle-sharp teeth. Its spotted coat was dirty and matted, and Ruthie could see its ribs through its fur. It was clearly motherless, fighting alone for survival. "Easy there, little one," Ruthie murmured, keeping her voice soft and steady. She took a step closer, and the kitten lashed out with its free paw, claws extended. "I know you're scared, but I want to help." Years of handling skittish cattle had taught Ruthie patience, but this was different. Every attempt to approach was met with fierce resistance. The kitten's eyes held no trust, only wild defiance. Ruthie's heart ached. She recognized that look of desperate loneliness. I had seen it in her own mirror too many times since Tom's passing. Using her jacket as a shield, Ruthie finally managed to get close enough to examine the trap. The kitten fought her every second, twisting and clawing, leaving scratches on her arms that stung like fire. But something in her wouldn't let her walk away. "You remind me of myself," she told the snarling creature. Too proud to accept help, too scared to trust. With careful movements, she worked the trap's mechanism, finally freeing the kitten's leg. Before she could check for injuries, it tried to bolt, but stumbled, clearly weak from its ordeal, making a decision she knew many would call foolish. Ruthie scooped up the struggling animal, wrapping it securely in her jacket. The walk back to her ranch house was a battle, punctuated by growls and the occasional escape attempt. Inside her barn, Ruthie prepared a secure enclosure with fresh hay, water, and a small dish of raw chicken from her kitchen. The moment she released the kitten, it retreated to the farthest corner, hissing warnings at her approach. "Here's your dinner," Ruthie said, setting down the food. "Though I suspect you're too stubborn to eat it while I'm watching." The next morning, Jake, one of her ranch hands, noticed the new arrival. His weathered face creased with concern. "Mrs. Wainwright, you can't be serious. That there's a predator. It'll be killing your chickens soon as it gets the chance." "It's injured and half-starved," Ruthie replied firmly. "I'm not asking for help, just letting you know it's here." Throughout the day, other workers stopped by, each offering their own warnings. "It ain't a house cat, ma'am," said Pete, shaking his head. "You're wasting your time on a wild thing that'll never thank you for it." Ruthie ignored them all, continuing to bring fresh food and water. The kitten remained hostile, refusing to eat when anyone was present. But each morning, Ruthie found empty dishes, proving that hunger eventually won out over pride. As she watched the defiant little creature, Ruthie reflected on her own struggles since losing Tom. She'd rejected help from well-meaning neighbors, determined to prove she could manage alone. The kitten's fierce independence struck a chord deep within her. "We're quite a pair," she told it softly, sitting near the enclosure one evening. "Both of us too set in our ways to admit we need others." The kitten stared back, still distrustful, but perhaps with slightly less hostility than before. Days passed, and while the kitten showed no signs of warming to human contact, Ruthie persisted. She cleaned its wound, changed its bedding, and provided fresh food, accepting the hisses and swats as part of the process. Each small task gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. To her ranch hands' continued disapproval, Ruthie knew she'd made the right choice. This wasn't about taming a wild animal, it was about offering help to a creature in need, even when that help wasn't welcomed. In its fierce struggle to survive alone, she saw her own path to healing. One small step at a time, Ruthie was cleaning out the barn one morning when she noticed Boone, her faithful white Labrador, making his way slowly toward the bobcat's enclosure. His nails clicked softly against the wooden floor as he approached, his aging body moving with deliberate care. "Careful, old friend," Ruthie called out, but there was no real worry in her voice. Boone had always shown remarkable judgment with other animals, a trait that had made him invaluable during his younger years, helping her husband, Tom, work the ranch. The Bobcat Kitten noticed Boone's approach immediately. Its fur bristled, and a low growl rumbled from its throat. But Boone seemed unaffected by the threat display. He simply lowered his large frame to the ground about 6 feet from the cage, resting his graying muzzle on his paws. The kitten's reaction was fascinating to watch. It paced and hissed, occasionally swatting through the cage bars with its good paw, but Boone remained still as stone. His gentle brown eyes followed the kitten's movements without any sign of aggression or fear. "Well, would you look at that?" Ruthie murmured, pausing in her work to observe the unlikely pair. Day after day, Boone returned to his self-appointed post. Sometimes he would lie there for hours, seemingly content just to keep the wild creature company. The kitten's reactions gradually became less violent, though it still maintained a wary distance. One afternoon, Ruthie's brother-in-law Stephen showed up unannounced. His boots echoed heavily on the barn floor as he strode in, making the kitten shrink back into its corner. "This has got to stop, Ruthie," Stephen said, his voice stern. "I heard about this foolishness from the Jenkins over at the feed store. You can't keep a wild animal like this." Ruthie straightened her back, meeting his concerned gaze. "I'm not keeping it permanently, Stephen. I'm just helping it heal." "It's dangerous," Stephen insisted, stepping closer to the cage. The kitten immediately began hissing and spitting, its claws slashing through the air. "See? That thing's nothing but teeth and claws. It'll never be anything else." Boone, who had been dozing nearby, lifted his head and gave a soft huff, as if disagreeing with Stephen's assessment. The lab's presence seemed to calm the kitten slightly, though it continued to eye Stephen with distrust. "Maybe you're right," Ruthie said quietly, "but I'm not trying to turn it into a house pet. I'm just giving it a chance to survive." Stephen shook his head, his expression a mixture of frustration and worry. Tom would never have allowed this. He understood the importance of protecting the livestock from predators. The words stung, but Ruthie held her ground. "Tom also taught me about compassion, Stephen. Or did you forget how he nursed that injured mare everyone said was beyond help?" Their conversation was interrupted by more visitors, Martha and Jim Watson from the neighboring ranch. They'd brought some fence posts Ruthie had ordered, but their eyes immediately went to the bobcat's enclosure. "Oh my word," Martha exclaimed, keeping her distance. "The rumors are true." "Ruthie, honey, you can't seriously be trying to rehabilitate a bobcat." Jim nodded in agreement. "These animals are born wild. Ruthie, no amount of kindness will change their nature." Throughout the stream of warnings and concerned advice, Boone remained by the cage, his steady presence a sharp contrast to the humans' agitation. Ruthie noticed something remarkable. While the kitten continued to growl at the visitors, its posture was less aggressive when it looked at Boone. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Ruthie sat on a hay bale watching Boone and the kitten. The lab had inched closer to the cage than ever before, now only about 3 feet away. The kitten sat upright, alert but not hostile, its amber eyes fixed on the dog. "You're quite the diplomat, aren't you, old boy?" Ruthie said softly. Boone's tail thumped once against the floor in response. As the days passed, Ruthie began to notice more subtle changes. The kitten's growls became less frequent when Boone was present. Sometimes it would even lie down near the side of the cage closest to where the dog rested, though still maintaining a cautious distance. It was a small thing, this fragile tolerance between predator and potential prey, but it gave Ruthie hope. If a wild bobcat could learn to accept Boone's presence, maybe there was more possibility for change than her well-meaning neighbors believed. One morning, Ruthie caught her breath as she entered the barn. The kitten was asleep, curled up against the cage bars, while Boone dozed barely 2 feet away. Neither animal stirred at her entrance, sharing a peaceful moment that would have seemed impossible just weeks before. The morning sun streamed through the barn windows, casting long shadows. Across the dusty floor, Ruthie stood quietly, watching as Boone lay near the cage, his white coat almost glowing in the early light. The Bobcat Kitten had settled into a tentative routine, no longer thrashing wildly when she approached with food and water. "You're something special, aren't you?" Ruthie murmured to Boone, who thumped his tail against the floor without taking his eyes off the kitten. The small creature was actually eating now, though it still retreated to the far corner. Whenever humans came too close, the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside broke the peaceful moment. Ruthie's shoulders tensed as she recognized the sleek, black truck pulling up to her barn. Clayton Dempsey's vehicle was as imposing as the man himself, and just as unwelcome on her property. Clayton slammed his truck door and strode toward the barn, his expensive boots raising small clouds of dust. His weather-beaten face was set in hard lines, cold eyes fixed on Ruthie as he approached. "Wainwright," he called out, not bothering with pleasantries. "Word is, you're harboring a predator on your property." Ruthie stepped forward, positioning herself between Clayton and the cage. "I'm helping an injured animal recover, Clayton, nothing more. That's not how the law sees it." Clayton's voice carried the weight of assumed authority. "Bobcats are vermin. They're a threat to livestock and legally classified as such. You can't keep it here." The kitten had pressed itself against the back of the cage, fur bristling. Boone rose slowly to his feet, moving to stand beside Ruthie. Though the old dog didn't growl, his presence was steady and protective. The law also allows for wildlife rehabilitation, Ruthie countered, grateful her voice remained steady. I checked. Clayton, I'm well within my rights. Clayton's face darkened. Don't play games with me, Ruthie. That cat needs to be destroyed before it causes real damage. If you won't handle it, I will. You'll do no such thing, Ruthie said, her voice sharp. This is my property, Clayton Dempsey, and you have no authority here. Clayton took a step forward, his height allowing him to loom over Ruthie. Your husband understood how things work out here. He knew the importance of controlling predators. Without Tom around, maybe you've forgotten how vulnerable a small ranch can be. The threat in his words was clear, but Boone's solid presence beside her gave Ruthie strength. The dog's calm demeanor seemed to steady her, just as it had helped calm the kitten. I haven't forgotten anything, Ruthie replied, meeting Clayton's gaze. Tom taught me about protecting what's right, not just what's convenient. This kitten deserves a chance to heal. You're making a mistake, Clayton growled. That thing will never be anything but a killer. It's in its nature. Ruthie glanced at the cage, where the kitten had pressed itself against the bars closest to Boone, as if seeking protection from the angry human. Nature isn't as simple as you'd like to believe. Clayton, look at them, a lab and a bobcat. Natural enemies, yet here they are. Clayton's laugh was harsh. Sentiment will be the death of your ranch, Ruthie. Mark my words, you'll regret this decision. He turned on his heel and stalked back to his truck. Before climbing in, he called back, get rid of it, or I'll make sure it's handled properly. One way or another, that cat won't be here long. The truck's engine roared to life, and Clayton peeled out of the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Ruthie's hands were shaking, but she held her ground until the sound of his engine faded away. Boone pressed against her leg, offering silent support. Ruthie knelt down and wrapped her arms around his neck, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Thank you, old friend, she whispered into his fur. You knew better than all of us, didn't you? Sometimes the fiercest creatures just need a little patience and understanding. The kitten watched them from its cage, its amber eyes alert but no longer filled with the blind panic of its first days. Somehow Boone's quiet persistence had begun to transform the wild creature, showing Ruthie that change was possible, even in the face of threats and opposition. As she prepared the kitten's evening meal, Ruthie felt a new resolve strengthen her spine. Clayton Dempsey might have money and influence, but she had something stronger, the courage to stand up for what she believed was right. Inspired by a gentle old dog who refused to give up on a frightened wild thing, the full moon cast long shadows across Ruthie's ranch as she made her nightly check on the animals. Everything seemed peaceful until she reached Boone's kennel, where she'd been keeping the Bobcat Kitten. Her heart stopped when she saw the empty cage. Its door somehow worked loose. No, she whispered, her voice trembling. The door swung slightly in the night breeze, its latch bent at an odd angle. The kitten must have worked at it persistently until it gave way. Ruthie spun around, scanning the darkness. Boone, she called out. Usually, the old lab would come trotting at the sound of her voice, but tonight there was only silence. A quick check of his usual sleeping spot revealed it empty. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing scattered prints in the dirt. The smaller paw prints of the Bobcat Kitten mingled with larger dog tracks, Boone's familiar stride. They led away from the kennel, heading toward the mountain foothills that bordered her property. Boone, she called again more urgently. This time, the wind carried her voice away into the night. Fear gripped her chest as she thought of Clayton Dempsey's threats. If he found out the bobcat had escaped, he wouldn't hesitate to hunt it down. Ruthie rushed back to the house, her mind racing. She grabbed her emergency pack, the one she always kept ready for searching lost cattle. Her hands shook as she added extra water bottles and a basic first aid kit. The thought of Boone out there, possibly chasing the frightened kitten through dangerous terrain, made her stomach churn. The tracks were easier to follow once she got her bearings. Boone's prints were clear in the softer dirt near the creek bed, moving steadily alongside the smaller bobcat tracks. They weren't running prints. Both animals appeared to be walking together, which made no sense at all. What are you doing, old boy? Ruthie muttered, following the trail with her flashlight. The prints led straight toward the mountain path, a route she knew well from countless rides checking fence lines. But at night, with only moonlight and her flashlight to guide her, the familiar trail seemed alien and threatening. She thought about calling for help, but who would come? Her nearest neighbors were miles away, and most would side with Clayton anyway. They'd be more likely to grab their rifles than help search for a vermin predator. The night air grew colder as she climbed higher into the foothills. Her flashlight beam caught something pale moving through the brush ahead. Her heart leaped, thinking it was Boone, but it was just a patch of white mountain laurel swaying in the wind. The tracks continued upward, and Ruthie followed doggedly. Her breathing grew heavy from the elevation gain, but she couldn't stop. Boone was 13 years old, far too old to be wandering the mountains at night. And the kitten, though healing, was still weak from its time in the trap. A coyote's howl echoed through the darkness, making Ruthie jump. It sounded far off, but the noise reminded her of all the dangers lurking in the night. Mountain lions sometimes roamed these slopes, and there were steep drops hidden in the darkness. Boone, she called again, her voice cracking with worry. Where are you, boy? The trail grew steeper, forcing her to scramble over loose rocks. The tracks were harder to follow here, appearing only in patches of soil between the stones. But they were still moving together, her gentle old lab and the wild kitten, heading deeper into the mountains as if drawn by some shared purpose she couldn't understand. Ruthie paused to catch her breath, leaning against a boulder. The moon had risen higher, casting enough light to see the valley spread out below. Her ranch looked tiny from here, a collection of dark shapes marked by the single yellow porch light she'd left burning. What if she couldn't find them? The thought brought tears to her eyes. Boone had been her constant companion since Tom's death, the one creature who seemed to understand her grief without judgment. And the kitten, despite its wildness, it had started to trust, started to heal. She couldn't bear the thought of Clayton or his friends hunting it down. The wind carried a familiar sound, the soft jingle of Boone's collar tags. Ruthie straightened up, straining to hear over her pounding heart. It came again, somewhere up ahead in the darkness. "Boone," she called, softer now, not wanting to startle either animal if they were near. The tags jingled again, closer this time. Ruthie adjusted her pack and pressed forward, holding tight to her flashlight. Whatever had drawn Boone and the kitten into the mountains, she would find them. She had to, before Clayton discovered they were missing and seized his chance to handle things properly. The mountain path twisted ahead into darkness, and Ruthie followed, driven by determination and fear for both animals. Each step took her further from safety, deeper into the wild night, but she couldn't turn back, not while Boone and the kitten were out there somewhere, their tracks leading her onward into uncertainty. Ruthie's boots slipped on the loose shale as she climbed higher into the mountains. The beam of her flashlight caught the glint of scattered rocks tumbling down the slope behind her. The night had grown colder, and her breath came out in visible puffs in the beam of light. A sharp crack echoed through the darkness, a rifle being loaded. Ruthie froze. Through the trees ahead, she caught the gleam of a different flashlight beam sweeping the mountainside. Clayton. He must have been watching her property, waiting for just this opportunity. She quickly switched off her light and pressed herself against a large boulder, heart pounding. Clayton's voice carried through the night air, rough with anger. "Come on out, you worthless creature," he called. "No use hiding now." Ruthie held her breath as Clayton's light swept past her hiding spot. She could see his silhouette now, rifle held ready as he moved through the trees about 50 yards ahead. His expensive boots crunched on the loose rock with each step. She had to find Boone and the kitten before Clayton did. Carefully, she began, edging along the boulder, trying to circle around to higher ground where she might spot them first. The mountain path narrowed treacherously. In the dim moonlight, Ruthie could see a steep ravine dropping away to her right. One wrong step here could send her tumbling down the rocky slope. She pressed her back against the cliff face, inching sideways. A rock shifted under her foot. Ruthie's stomach lurched as she felt herself starting to slip. Her hand scrambled for purchase on the rough stone wall, but the loose gravel kept sliding. For one horrible moment, she felt herself tipping toward the dark void of the ravine. Then something solid pressed against her leg, steadying her. A familiar white shape materialized from the shadows. Boone. His strong shoulder braced her, giving her the stability she needed to regain her footing. "Boone," she whispered, relief flooding through her. She dropped to her knees and hugged him, tight, burying her face in his thick fur. Oh, thank goodness. But Boone pulled away, turning to look back the way he had come. And there, emerging cautiously from behind a stunted pine, was the Bobcat Kitten. Ruthie's breath caught in her throat. The kitten's eyes glowed in the darkness as it regarded her, but instead of the usual hostility, there was something different in its gaze now, a wary trust, born from its connection with Boone. The old lab wagged his tail gently, looking between Ruthie and the kitten. He took a few steps toward Ruthie, then stopped and looked back at the bobcat. The kitten hesitated, then followed, staying close to Boone's side. Clayton's voice shattered the moment. "There you are." His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, catching all three of them in its harsh glare. The rifle barrel gleamed as he raised it to his shoulder. "Step aside, Ruthie," he ordered. "That thing's a menace, and you know it." "No." Ruthie's voice was firm as she straightened up. "Look at them, Clayton. Really look." The Bobcat Kitten pressed against Boone's leg but didn't run. The old lab stood calm and steady, a quiet guardian between the kitten and the rifle. "That's impossible," Clayton muttered. But Ruthie could hear the uncertainty in his voice as he watched the wild predator willingly staying close to the domestic dog. "It's not impossible," Ruthie said softly. "It just takes patience. And kindness. Something you wouldn't understand." The rifle barrel wavered slightly. In the moonlight, Ruthie could see Clayton's face, confusion warring with his usual anger as he watched Boone gently nuzzle the kitten's ear. The Bobcat Kitten looked up at Boone, then at Ruthie. With slow, deliberate steps, it followed the old lab as he moved closer to Ruthie's side. The three of them stood together, facing Clayton and his rifle under the vast mountain sky. It was everything the ranch hands had said couldn't happen, everything Clayton had mocked. But here was the proof. Not just a temporary tolerance, but a real bond between Boone and the wild creature everyone had written off as untamable. Clayton lowered his rifle slightly, still processing the unexpected scene before him. As he shifted his stance, Ruthie noticed something odd, a canvas bag partially hidden behind a nearby tree, its contents spilling onto the rocky ground. Her flashlight beam caught something metallic glinting from the bag. More traps, dozens of them, rusted and cruel like the one that had caught the kitten, but these weren't old and abandoned. They were fresh, ready to be set. "What's all this, Clayton?" Ruthie asked, her voice hard as she stepped closer to the bag. Keeping Boone and the kitten behind her, Clayton's face twisted. "That's none of your business, Wainwright. Stay back." But Ruthie had already seen enough. Beside the traps were bundles of fur, soft, spotted pelts that made her stomach turn. Some were still fresh, others dried and ready for sale. Among them were several small pelts that could only have come from young bobcats. Not much bigger than the kitten she'd rescued. "So this is what it's really about," she said, anger rising in her chest. "Not protecting livestock at all. You're running an illegal trapping operation. You don't understand anything." Clayton snarled, but his eyes kept darting to the bag. "To the evidence of his real business? I understand plenty," Ruthie shot back. "Those traps I've been finding on my property, they weren't old ones left over from years ago. They were yours. You've been setting them everywhere, haven't you? Catching anything you can sell?" She looked at the trembling kitten pressed against Boone's side. "That's why you were so angry when I took this one. It wasn't about protecting the ranch. It was about losing merchandise." Clayton's face had gone red with rage. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Playing savior to some worthless predator. Meanwhile, I'm the one making something of this land. There's money in those pelts, real money. More than your precious cattle will ever bring. Money built on cruelty," Ruthie said. She picked up one of the small pelts, her hands shaking. "How many others like this one did you kill? How many mothers and kittens died in your traps?" "Shut up," Clayton growled, raising the rifle again. "Just shut up and get out of my way." But Ruthie stood her ground. She could see now why Clayton had been so desperate to stop her from helping the kitten. A rescued animal might draw attention. Questions might be asked. Someone might start looking more closely at what was really happening in these mountains. "The game warden might be interested in this," she said quietly. "The sheriff too. All these traps, all these pelts, there must be quite a paper trail. Buyers, shipping records. You're not telling anyone anything," Clayton said. But there was a note of fear beneath the threat in his voice. Ruthie pulled out her phone. Already, clicking photos of the illegal trapping equipment and the piles of pelts, Clayton lunged forward. But Boone was faster. The old lab planted himself between Clayton and Ruthie, his usual gentle demeanor replaced by a deep, warning growl. The bobcat kitten, startled by the sudden movement, darted behind a rock. But it didn't flee into the darkness. Instead, it watched intently, its wild eyes fixed on the confrontation. "It's over, Clayton," Ruthie said, continuing to document everything with her phone's camera. "All of it. The trapping, the smuggling, everything. I'm not letting you hurt any more animals." "You can't prove anything," Clayton blustered, but his voice was uncertain now. "It's my word against yours." "These photos say different," Ruthie replied, "and I bet if someone starts looking, they'll find a lot more evidence. How many other sites like this do you have hidden in these mountains? How many more bags full of illegal traps and pelts?" Clayton's face showed she'd hit close to the truth. His empire of cruelty wasn't limited to this one spot. This was just one small part of a larger operation, spread across the wild places where few people went. But that was about to change. Ruthie's discovery would bring it all crashing down. No more hidden traps. No more animals suffering slow deaths for their fur. No more mothers and babies caught in Clayton's cruel devices. The bobcat kitten crept out from behind its rock, moving closer to Boone again. Looking at it now, Ruthie saw not just one small survivor, but a symbol of all the animals that hadn't been as lucky. All the ones that had died alone in Clayton's traps. Their fur destined for illegal markets. She raised her phone one more time, capturing a final photo of Clayton standing amid his illegal trapping equipment, his rifle still half-raised, his face a mask of thwarted rage and fear. Evidence that would ensure justice wasn't just for one rescued kitten, but for all the creatures of these mountains. Clayton's retaliation came swift and brutal. In the pale light of dawn, Ruthie found the first trap, a vicious metal contraption, hidden beneath fallen leaves near her property line. Her stomach turned as she carefully disarmed it, remembering how she'd found the bobcat kitten in a similar device just weeks ago. But this was only the beginning. Throughout the day, she discovered more traps scattered across her land, near the water trough where Boone liked to drink. Along the paths they walked daily, even close to the barn where the kitten had begun spending time. Each one was new, the metal still shining, placed with calculated cruelty. "He's not even trying to hide them anymore," Ruthie muttered to herself, adding another trap to the growing pile in her truck bed. Boone padded alongside her, his nose working overtime to detect the scent of danger. The old lab had become even more protective since their confrontation with Clayton. Staying close to both Ruthie and the bobcat kitten, the kitten watched from its perch on a fence post. its wild eyes tracking their movements. Though still untamed, it had developed a cautious routine of following them at a distance, particularly when Boone was present. The trust they'd built was fragile but real. Late that afternoon, Ruthie noticed something that made her blood run cold. Near the edge of her property, just where the grass met the scrubland, she spotted several chunks of meat laid out in an unnatural pattern. The meat looked fresh, deliberately placed, and something about it made her deeply uneasy. "Boone, stay," she commanded sharply as her dog started to trot toward the suspicious offering. The lab halted, looking back at her with confused eyes. But years of training held, and he remained where he was, while Ruthie approached the meat carefully. The sickly sweet smell hit her before she got too close, a chemical odor that didn't belong. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone to document yet another of Clayton's attacks. This wasn't just about traps anymore. This was poison, strategically placed where both Boone and the bobcat would be likely to find it. A movement caught her eye. The kitten had silently descended from its post and was prowling toward the meat, nose twitching with interest. Ruthie's heart leaped into her throat. "No," she called out, knowing even as she did that the wild creature wouldn't understand or obey. But to her amazement, Boone was already moving. The old dog positioned himself between the kitten and the poison bait, using his body as a gentle barrier. The bobcat hissed softly, but stopped its advance. Ruthie worked quickly to collect and dispose of the tainted meat, her mind racing. Clayton had escalated beyond simple traps. He was trying to kill both animals at once, and he didn't care about the cruelty of the method. A slow death by poison would be agonizing. "We need to be more careful now," she told Boone, running her hand through his white fur. The lab leaned against her leg, his usual calm demeanor tinged with alertness. The bobcat kitten watched them from a safe distance, its tail twitching with nervous energy. Over the next few days, Ruthie found more poisoned bait scattered across her property. Each time, she documented it carefully before disposing of it safely. Each piece of evidence built a stronger case against Clayton. But that wouldn't matter if one of the animals found the poison first. The stress began to wear on all of them. Boone grew more vigilant, checking every patch of ground before allowing the kitten near it. The bobcat became skittish again, its newfound trust strained by the constant tension. Ruthie barely slept, worried that she might miss some hidden danger in the dark. One evening, she caught sight of Clayton watching from across the fence line, his face twisted with malice. He didn't speak, didn't threaten, he just stood there, confident that his traps and poison would eventually succeed where direct confrontation had failed. "I won't let you hurt them," Ruthie called out, her voice carrying across the distance between them. "No matter what you do, I won't let you win." Clayton's only response was a cold smile before he turned and walked away. But his message was clear. This wasn't over. He would keep trying, keep placing traps, keep leaving poison, until either Boone or the bobcat kitten made a fatal mistake. The trust they'd built, the unlikely bond between dog and wild cat, the peaceful routine they'd begun, to establish all of it was under threat. Every moment could bring disaster if they weren't careful. One wrong step, one curious sniff, one moment of inattention could end in tragedy. That night, as Ruthie watched Boone and the kitten sharing space on the porch, not touching, but closer than anyone would have thought possible, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. These two creatures trusted her, each in their own way. She had to find a way to protect them both from Clayton's escalating violence. The early morning sun had barely risen when Ruthie heard it. A sound that made her heart stop. A piercing, desperate cry echoed across her property, filled with pain and terror. She knew instantly it was the bobcat kitten. Boone was already at the door, whining urgently. Ruthie grabbed her jacket and rushed outside, following the continued sounds of distress. The cries led her to the far corner of her property, where Clayton had been watching the day before. There, caught in the cruel metal teeth of another trap, the kitten thrashed and struggled. "Oh no, no, no," Ruthie breathed, running toward the trapped animal. The sight brought tears to her eyes. After all their progress, after all the trust they'd built, the kitten was once again suffering in one of Clayton's devices. But before she could reach the animal, a sharp voice cut through the morning air. "Don't take another step, Ruthie." Clayton emerged from behind a cluster of trees, his rifle trained steadily on the trapped kitten. His face wore a satisfied smirk, as if this was exactly what he'd been waiting for. "Clayton, please," Ruthie said, her voice shaking. "It's just a baby. Let me help it." "That baby is a predator," Clayton snarled, "and I've got every right to protect my property from vermin." He took a step closer, the rifle never wavering. The kitten's cries grew more desperate. Blood stained its fur where the trap bit into its leg, and Ruthie could see its strength fading. She had to do something, but Clayton's finger rested too close to the trigger. Suddenly, Boone moved forward. The old lab positioned himself between Clayton's rifle and the trapped kitten. His usual gentle demeanor replaced by a protective stance. Though he made no aggressive moves, his message was clear. He wouldn't let Clayton harm the young bobcat. "Get your mutt out of the way," Clayton demanded, his face reddening with anger, "or I'll shoot through him if I have to." Ruthie's fear turned to cold determination. She wouldn't let either animal die here, not like this. Moving slowly, deliberately, she began to edge toward the trapped kitten. "Stay back," Clayton shouted, swinging the rifle toward her. "You'll have to shoot me too," Ruthie said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Because I'm not letting you kill either of them." She kept moving, one careful step at a time. Boone remained firmly in place, his solid presence giving her courage. The kitten had stopped struggling, watching her approach with wide, pain-filled eyes. Clayton's finger tightened on the trigger. "I'm warning you, Ruthie." "Go ahead then," she challenged, though her heart hammered in her chest. "Shoot an unarmed woman in broad daylight. Show everyone exactly who you are." Her hands reached the trap. The kitten didn't fight her this time, too exhausted from its struggles. With trembling fingers, she worked to release the mechanism, trying to block out the sound of Clayton's heavy breathing and the cold knowledge that one squeeze of the trigger could end everything. The trap finally sprang open. The kitten pulled its injured leg free, but instead of fleeing, it huddled close to Boone, seeking protection from the man with the gun. The sight of the wild creature trusting her dog made Ruthie's eyes blur with tears. "This isn't over," Clayton growled, finally lowering his rifle. "That animal's days are numbered, and you can't watch it every second. "Actually, I can," Ruthie replied, carefully gathering the injured kitten in her arms, while Boone kept himself between them and Clayton. "And I will every trap you set, every bit of poison you leave. I'll find them all, and I'll keep finding them until someone stops you for good." Clayton's face twisted with rage, but he seemed to realize he'd lost this round. With a final threatening glare, he turned and stalked away, his rifle still gripped tightly in his hands. Only when he was completely out of sight did Ruthie's legs give out. She sank to the ground, cradling the injured kitten, while Boone pressed close to her side. The young bobcat, despite its pain, didn't struggle or try to escape. Instead, it leaned against her, as if finally understanding she was trying to help. "We're going to get you fixed up," she whispered, gently examining the wound, "and then we're going to find a way to stop him. I promise." The kitten's only response was to press closer, its wild heart beating against her hands, while Boone kept watch, ready to protect them both if Clayton returned. Time seemed to freeze as Clayton's finger tightened on the trigger. In that heartbeat of silence, something changed in Boone's stance. The old lab's muscles tensed, and without warning, he launched himself forward with a power that belied his age. Clayton barely had time to register the white blur before Boone slammed into his chest. The impact sent both man and dog tumbling, the rifle flying from Clayton's grasp. It clattered against a nearby rock, the sound shocking Ruthie into action. Her body moved before her mind could process fear. She lunged for the weapon, her fingers closing around the cold metal just as Clayton shoved Boone aside and scrambled to his feet. Their eyes met, hers filled with determination, his with rage. "Don't you dare," Ruthie warned, pointing the rifle at him with shaking hands. Behind her, the kitten pressed close to Boone, who had positioned himself protectively despite favoring his right shoulder from the fall. Clayton's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "You don't have the guts to pull that trigger, Ruthie." "Maybe not," she admitted, keeping the rifle steady, "but I've got enough evidence here to put you away for a long time." She gestured toward the illegal trap with her chin. "How many more are out there, Clayton? How many pelts have you smuggled across the border?" His expression flickered, confirming her suspicions. "You can't prove anything. Those traps have your mark on them, and I bet if someone looks hard enough, they'll find plenty more proof of what you've been doing." Ruthie's voice grew stronger with each word. "Now get off my land." Clayton took a menacing step forward, but Boone's low growl stopped him short. The old dog might be injured, but the fierce loyalty in his eyes made it clear he would fight again, if necessary. "This isn't over," Clayton spat, backing away slowly. "Actually, it is." Ruthie kept the rifle trained on him until he disappeared into the trees. Only then did she lower it, her hands trembling as the adrenaline began to fade. She turned to check on Boone, who was already limping toward her. Despite his injury, his tail wagged gently, and his eyes held the same steady devotion they always had. The bobcat kitten, surprisingly, stayed close to him, as if drawing comfort from the dog's presence. "Oh, Boone," Ruthie whispered carefully, examining his shoulder. "You brave, foolish boy." The injury didn't seem serious. He'd likely be sore for a few days, but nothing was broken. The kitten watched their interaction with intense focus, its own wound still bleeding slowly. When Ruthie reached toward it, it didn't flinch away. Instead, it allowed her to gently check its leg, though it kept one paw pressed against Boone's side. "We need to document everything," Ruthie said, more to herself than her unusual companions. She pulled out her phone and began taking pictures. The trap, the signs of Clayton's regular presence in the area, the distinctive markings that proved these were his illegal devices. She found more evidence. As she searched the immediate area, hidden under brush and fallen leaves were more traps, some still holding tufts of fur from previous victims. Behind a large boulder, she discovered a cache of pelts, carefully wrapped and ready for transport. Through it all, Boone stayed by her side, the kitten never straying far from his protective presence. The young bobcat's trust in the dog seemed to extend tentatively to Ruthie now, as if it finally understood she meant to help, not harm. "Let's get you both home and patched up," Ruthie said softly. "Then I'm making some calls. Clayton's not hurting any more animals. Not here, not anywhere." She gathered the injured kitten carefully in her arms, its small body tense, but no longer fighting her touch. Boone pressed close to her leg as they walked, his gait uneven but determined. The morning sun broke through the trees, warming their backs as they made their way home. Three unlikely allies bound together by trust and courage. The rifle hung heavy in Ruthie's free hand, a reminder of how close they'd come to tragedy, and how Boone's selfless act had changed everything. She looked down at her faithful companion, his white coat dirty from the scuffle, but his spirit undimmed, and felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Together, they walked toward home and justice, leaving Clayton's darkness behind them. The morning after their confrontation with Clayton, Ruthie sat at her kitchen table, cradling a cup of coffee as she watched through the window. Outside, Boone lay in his favorite sunny spot, his white coat gleaming despite the bandage on his shoulder. Next to him, barely an arm's length away, the Bobcat Kitten dozed, its own wounds carefully cleaned and dressed. The sound of approaching vehicles made her straighten. 2 police cars and a game warden's truck rolled up her dusty driveway. She'd spent hours the previous evening talking to authorities, sharing photos and evidence of Clayton's illegal operation. Through the window, she saw Clayton in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage as officers led him toward a waiting patrol car. The game warden carried boxes of evidence, documents, ledgers, and shipping records seized from Clayton's property that proved the full scope of his smuggling operation. Mrs. Wainwright, the lead detective, approached her porch. "We found exactly where you said we would. The operation was bigger than we thought. Dozens of illegal traps, hundreds of pelts. He's been running this racket across state lines for years." Ruthie nodded, relief washing over her. "Will the charges stick?" "Oh yes, ma'am. Federal charges for wildlife trafficking, plus state violations for illegal trapping. You won't be setting any more snares for a long time." As if understanding the conversation, the Bobcat Kitten lifted its head, amber eyes tracking the officer's movements. But it didn't run or hide. Instead, it pressed closer to Boone, who remained calm and steady beside it. After the authorities left, Ruthie walked out to check on her unlikely pair. The kitten had grown noticeably in the weeks since she'd first found it in that cruel trap. Though still small, its coat was healthier now, its movements more confident. It watched her approach but showed no fear, secure in Boone's presence. "You two changed everything. You know that?" she said softly, settling onto the porch steps. Boone's tail thumped against the ground, and the kitten's ears twitched toward her voice. She remembered how empty the ranch had felt after losing Tom, the endless quiet, the meaningless routines. But now, watching Boone and his wild companion, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope? The Bobcat Kitten wasn't tame. Not really. Some mornings, Ruthie would wake to find it gone, disappeared into the hills like mist. But it always returned, drawn back by its bond with Boone. The old dog would wait patiently, somehow knowing his small friend would return, and greet it with the same gentle acceptance that had first earned its trust. Their unusual friendship had brought new life to the ranch. Word spread about the dog who'd befriended a bobcat, and about the widow who'd stood up to Clayton Dempsey. Other ranchers started reporting illegal traps they found, forming a network to protect the local wildlife. Ruthie found herself at the center of it all, her voice stronger now, her purpose clear. As the sun climbed higher, the kitten stirred and stretched, with a quick touch of its paw to Boone's side, a gesture that never failed to make Ruthie smile. It bounded toward the hills. Boone watched it go, untroubled, knowing it would return when the wild had filled its spirit again. "You taught me something important," Ruthie told Boone, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. "About trust and patience, and how love doesn't always look the way we expect it to." Boone leaned against her leg, his familiar warmth a comfort. The ranch no longer felt haunted by loss. Instead, it had become a sanctuary not just for a wounded bobcat, but for Ruthie's healing heart as well. In saving the kitten, and standing against cruelty, she'd found her way back to life. The sound of quiet rustling made her look up. The Bobcat Kitten had already returned, settling once more beside Boone in the morning sun. Ruthie smiled, understanding. Now that home wasn't just a place, it was this moment, this unlikely family, this second chance at joy. If even one moment stayed with you, hit subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story, written gently for the heart.